Hey everybody, Steve Cady here at Bowling Green State University, and with our Doctorate in Organization Development and Change program at the university, along with our Master's program in Organization Development and Change. I have the honor of being the director for the Master's of Organization Development and Change, which is a professional doctorate focused on transforming organizations, revitalizing communities, and developing human potential. And we are focused on building thought leadership in service of professional joy. And so that's the whole notion, is when we take our knowledge and we share it with others, we make a difference that scales and ripples out, and it gives us more opportunities to make a difference in very meaningful ways through that thought leadership. And we have a great group of people here today. We have Cliff and David, so we're glad you're going to be here. Send a big prayer out to Frances. She's recovering from a little pneumonia. She's on the other side of it, but she's making herself rest. And if you know Frances, you will know that she is having a hard time not being here today, because she would love to be here. And along with the program here at Bowling Green State University, we have the Organization Development and Change Division of the Academy of Management. And we also, that's a sponsor of this and a partner with us, along with All Things Change podcast series and the Nexus for Change organization, which is what brings together the Collaborative Change Library and Change Handbook and all the people doing collaborative and participatory work out and around the world. And so I'd like to share with you a little bit about the series, which has turned out to be just quite awesome. The Think Tank series is, we're going to be doing it annually, came from a generous offer of so many people willing to come in and share their wisdom. And we sent out an invite, and many people said, hey, I'll be glad to come in and share. And so we've had several people coming in over, and we'll be going all the way through February. You can see now you can jump to recordings here and check out previous recordings. So you just come back to the flyer, you can see the previous ones as we go. And we have our session today. And if we go to the session here, we have David with Gurteen Knowledge, and he's got lots of books. Conversational Leadership is one that he's working on now and talking about the Conversation Cafe and all of the things that I really value about good connection amongst people. Cliff, so glad that you're here with us. And polarities, I love polarity work. It's an amazing concept, and your work with Polarity Partners and SixSEED and your work that you do and bringing this knowledge out there is really important. So today we're going to get to hear from the two of them. David's going to go first, and then Cliff will go second. We'll then go into breakouts and have some discussion, and then we'll come back for a much deeper dive discussion. This has really been very fruitful, and so it's been just great. And so to begin, we will start with
me.
Taking off my share screen. We'll start with David. I want to stop sharing my screen. And
Okay.
David, thank you. Thanks for making the time for being here with us today. So I'll turn it over to you and jump in and take us wherever you'd like to take us.
Okay, where shall I take you? Right. First thing to do is to do a little bit of screen clicking. That's a few slides here. Hopefully this all looks good. Just bear with me. What do I want to do here? I want to, right, okay. From beginning. Can everybody see that? Everybody happy? Right.
Yeah, right.
So what I want to do in these next 15 minutes is take a look at this thing called conversational leadership. I know a few of you are familiar with my work and know that I started running knowledge cafes some 21 years ago now, September 2002. That's 22 years, isn't it? And you know, they were all about having open conversations. And this photograph here is a picture of one of my cafes a few years ago. But in running those cafes, I got to run many of them. I got to run them pretty much around the world, one way or the other. I learned a lot about people, a lot about culture, a lot about conversation. And so about 7 years ago, I started to write an online blook, as I call it. It's a cross between a blog and a book. This is it here. On what I was calling conversational leadership. And I say it started out as me trying to, if you like, extensively document how to run knowledge cafes and after action reviews and peer assists, all the conversational KM tools. That was the idea. But of course, with all good ideas, often they expand and extend and go in different directions. And one of the questions I kept asking myself as I was writing is, okay, having better conversations is good, but why? You know, because I just felt that there was more to having conversations than just having better conversations, say. And so this is really where this idea of conversational leadership was born. So what I want to do here in a very short period of time is just give you an overview of the concept. I want to start by looking at some of the rationale that kind of emerged behind it, and then just briefly look at it from a high level. If you like what I'm talking about, just go take a look at the site. Okay. So the one thing I'm sure we'll agree with is that today our world is phenomenally complex. And I just want to take you actually very, very quickly through these few slides. I normally take a little bit longer, but just to set the context. So, we're living in what's, a so-called meta crisis. I tend to think of the world as being somewhat of a mess at, all sorts of levels. It's kind of interesting that our lifestyle, if you will, is probably better than it's ever been, but there are many, many issues that we face in the world, and they're all, they're all interrelated. They all interact with each other, hence the meta crisis. And for me, one of the underlying reasons behind all of this is that we're living in a very connected world, a hyper-connected world. I mean, the world has changed. I'm 76 years old this year. 75 years, we're going back to just after the end of the Second World War. Really, the world has changed out of all recognition in the last 75 years. And it's not just the internet, if you like, that's connected us. Our global financial system, our supply chains, our utilities, international travel and transport. We're living in a very connected world. And of course, connectivity leads to complexity. I'm sure you're all familiar with the age-old or seemingly age-old VUCA acronym of the world being volatile, unpredictable, complex, and ambiguous. I say confusing really rather than complex, because it's this connectivity that leads to the complexity. And what complexity means is that the world is inherently unpredictable, and that whatever we do, there are always unintended or unforeseen consequences. Everything is twisted, everything is entangled together, which is, I think, exacerbating, if not directly causing, the problems that we face. Of course, what doesn't help is that we human beings are incredibly complex. We've only got to look at the politics that's going on right now to realize just how complex we are. We're not the rational creatures that we think we are. Dave Snowden calls it anthro complexity. And so we incredibly complex humans interacting with an incredibly complex technical world, just compounding the complexity that we face. And I think fundamentally is that many of our old ways of thinking and working, are simply not working anymore. We don't really understand what's going on in the world. We don't understand ourselves and our biases and maybe our sort of cognitive limitations. We're certainly not rational creatures. I often say we're rationalizing ones or post-rationalizing ones. We draw conclusions and then look for the evidence to support our our pre-conclusions. So for me, it's really time that we need to start to rethink everything. And I think a big part of this rethink is through the conversations that we need to have. So that's sort of a little bit the background for the rationale behind conversational leadership. So let's just look at what conversational leadership is. And again, I say this is really at a very high level. This is the definition I usually give. I say fundamentally it's about appreciating the extraordinary but underutilized power of conversation. The more time I've looked and researched and been engaged in conversations, the more I realize just how powerful it is, and the degree to which we, as I say, underutilize it. We just kind of accept it. We don't realize, I don't think, just how powerful conversation really is. So that's fundamental, but also recognizing that each and every one of us can practice leadership, that leadership is a practice, not necessarily a position of authority, and that we can start to adopt in a much more conversational way in which we live and work together. So again, just a very high level view of it. So let's look at the two words, leadership and conversation. So I just kind of made that point. And in a complex world, I think we all need to see leadership as a practice and not as a position of authority. So this is about taking responsibility for the things that we're passionate about, taking responsibility for the things where we feel we can have some impact, and choosing, actually, consciously choosing to practice leadership. Stephen Covey, back in what was it now, 1989, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, said that in the industrial age, leadership was a position. In the knowledge age, it's a choice. I just got a 30-second video clip here of Ron Heifetz at Harvard, and he's really just emphasizing this point. I really do like this little clip of his. That's why I'm including it. So let's just play it.
Distinguishing leadership from authority helps us begin to see that if we understand leadership as a practice, as an activity, then it becomes available to anybody, high or low, any place they're positioned, simply because they passionately care about some problem situation, about the people in that problem situation, and then mobilize people with faith in their capacity to step up to the plate and meet that challenge.
Yeah, do you like that? Just taking some of his words there. We own collective responsibility for the global conditions that we impact and impact us. And that's kind of core. And we're not going to make the changes we'd like to see based on authority-based leadership, but by each and every one of us taking a leadership role. So that for me is a key message. So that's the leadership piece. Conversation, talking earlier about a complex world, just how complex the world is. So there are a few things we need to do if we recognize we're in that complex domain. First and foremost, we need to start to make better sense of what's going on, and we're not terribly good at that. And just given the complexity, I mean, it's very difficult to make sense of things because cause and effect no longer really apply. We certainly need to improve our decision making, our strategizing, our ability to innovate, I think, more wisely and avoid many of the unintended consequences that comes from operating in a complex world. Individually, we need to improve our ability to influence what's going on and to act. And clearly, we need to collaborate more. We need to improve the way we live and work together. And if you think about it, pretty much, well, totally, all of those things come about through having better conversations. It's all about conversation. So this is what we need to have. And another 30-second video clip I hope you're familiar with the work of Patricia Shaw. She was the founder of the Complexity Management Center at the University of Hertfordshire with Ralph Stacey. If you've been following what's been going on in the complexity world. And when I found this clip, this was a little bit of magic for me because it connected both conversation and leadership, as you will see. Let's.
I thought last night about how am I beginning myself to think about leadership, and at least an aspect of it, and if I take it away from leaders, and I would say, what is the work of leadership? What is a way of thinking about it? And I have several formulations that I wrote down last night. For a long time, I've been saying, I think one of the ways of thinking about leadership is thinking about convening conversations that might not happen otherwise.
Do you like that? One of the ways of thinking about leadership is thinking about convening conversations that might not happen otherwise. That's worth dwelling on for a moment. And hey, somebody mentioned Margaret Wheatley. So she's looking again at leadership and saying a leader these days needs to be a host, one who convenes diversity, convenes perspective, different viewpoints in creative processes where our mutual or our collective intelligence can come forth. I found that quote just the other day and added it at the last minute. I rather like that. So just drawing to a close. I hope I've not taken too long here. Just a few words in kind of conclusion. I think the point about conversational leadership is that it's not an OD initiative or an HR initiative. It's not just for senior managers or executives. It's something that each and every one of us can do in our own time, at our own level, in our own way, is take responsibility for the things that we feel passionate about, the things that we feel that we can change, maybe through interaction and conversation. So it's more mindset and a set of behaviors than anything else. What I love about it is that you don't need permission to have more conversations. You can do that anytime, anywhere. And it's not just about organizational life. It's about family, community, and I think more importantly, society. It's about creating a better world, not just having better conversations. So I just want to leave you with one last thought. What conversation is needed that you maybe could uniquely convene that might not happen otherwise, either at work, in your family, in your community? I'm just leaving you with that question, okay? So let me stop there and click stop share and come back to the main room. Here we go.
Thanks, David. That's wonderful. Thank you. And Cliff, with your work in polarity management, and you do a lot more than just that. I wouldn't say it's just, but polarity work is really important, and I really appreciate all that you do. Love to hear from you and your thoughts on what you'd like to share with us today.
Great. Thanks, Steve. And also, thank you, David. That was a perfect setup for me because I'd like to convene a conversation with all of you, and I thought I'd have some fun with that in my 15 minutes of fame here. I thought we might explore human-centered change from the perspective of change and stability. And the way I'd like to do that is unpack some values and fears that may actually be present for us as human development professionals in this human-centered age of AI and the change, the hyper change that's bringing. What I'd like to do is explore a couple strategies for leveraging these tensions using one of my favorite approaches, as Steve said, the polarity framework. Just real quick, my journey here on the AI track, which was not something that I thought even a year ago I would be involved in, is Polarity Partnerships has been developing some products that incorporate AI, and I started investigating that a bit myself, and that led me to take a 14-week course in AI ethics and governance. And I used what I learned in that course to present at the Capital Coaches Conference on AI coaches, which is a kind of a big, I guess, concern among some coaches in the field. I also noticed that a lot of my clients, both domestic and international, were really bringing a lot of major AI issues and challenges to me. So I thought I needed to learn something about it. And although this is my highly, biased perspective, people have shared with me that this lens is very helpful in just looking at this hyper accelerated transformation and change. So the conversation I'd like to convene here around AI is that it's never been so fast, and it will never be as slow as it is now. And Professor Stephen Hawking says that it's either the best or the worst thing that will ever happen to humanity. And recently, Geoffrey Hinton, who just won the Nobel Prize in Physics for basically discoveries and inventions around machine learning that paved the way to AI, said we have no experience of what it's like to have things smarter than us. And it's going to be wonderful in many respects, especially in areas like healthcare, but we also have to be very concerned about the consequences. So that's what I'd like to convene today. And I don't want this to feel like a training on AI, because I can barely remember my password, so I'm probably the last person who should be talking about AI. But I think it's useful if we think about Plato's cave, and just think about how these tools are kind of creating these realities for us in the context of our human interactions and conversations, as David was saying. Nowadays, we've got loads of AI-driven platforms that are essentially doing the work that we used to do. And those are around the area of productivity. There are also some chatbots that are functioning in the role of coaches or quasi-coaches, as I've learned, just doing a little bit of my own investigations around that. But the point is, these tools are faster and cheaper, and human-driven OD and coaching is slower and more expensive. So that's the conversation I'd like to convene today. So thank you. Any questions?
Well,
how does that feel?
I have a
fast.
question.
It
Awful.
felt fast. It felt fast.
I have a question. This is
So-
Rihanna
so-
Moore.
So hold on,
Moore.
Rihanna, hold on a second.
I'm not done. That was just a kickoff.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Oh, you
perfect.
mean that was a rhetorical question? I feel so, set up is the word? Okay, I'll say.
Cheated.
I said, what? That felt so fast. I'm like, boom, right?
Right. Yeah. So I imagine that kind of evoked quite a bit. And that's what I wanted to really just have us breathe into for a moment. I'm just realizing I neglected to start my timer. So what do we have, Steve, for me left? About 10 minutes?
Yeah, about 10 minutes. Yeah.
About 10 minutes. Let me hit it now. This is where it's a slippery slope for me, because we're opening up the polarity can of worms. But here's the bottom line. AI has been impacting and will continue to impact every workplace, every workforce for the rest of our careers and lives. Case in point, human development professionals. There are AIs for that now. It's here. They're going to get better. They're getting better as we speak. They'll expand and improve for the rest of our lives and careers. So how do we deal with them? And I think navigating our AI challenges and opportunities effectively may be useful as we provide support to leaders and organizations who are navigating their own AI challenges. So if we were to turn the model here on ourselves and just kind of breathe into this, for those of you who are not familiar with the Polarity framework, we're focusing on interdependencies, these things that show up in pairs. Inhale and exhale is a great metaphor for that. One reason is because if we try to choose a pole as a solution, it doesn't work. It's sensible at one level at one point in time, but it's not sustainable over time. So when we try to apply or thinking to an and thinking polarity, it gets us in trouble. And a lot of times in the conversation, and that's why David's piece was so important, the greater purpose oftentimes is not even in the conversation. So why do we inhale and exhale? We do it to stay alive, of course, but it's not in the initial tension that we often are experiencing. So if we look at the tension as a both and we recognize that there's a predictable dynamic to it that contributes to our greater purpose, we tend to orient ourselves to the tension differently than we otherwise would. Obviously, if we overfocus on inhale to the neglect of exhale, we're going to have too much CO2. If we do the opposite with exhale and we try to focus on that as a solution, we're going to end up with a lack of oxygen. So it just doesn't work over time. So if we were to turn this on ourselves and look at, okay, here's the change, here's the stability. The stability is around the human interaction, the conscious, carbon-based work that we do as human beings in these spaces where we're convening people in conversations. Now we've got this change around artificial intelligence, this non-conscious silicon-based. So how do we look at that and turn this inhale and exhale into something that we can make our own sense out of so that we can help our clients also make sense out of their own challenges? So I wanted to look at the greater purpose here because, again, sometimes that gets left out of the conversation. So if we're thinking about human-centered growth and development, there's a place perhaps for both. And when I set up that very cruel and unusual punishment question at the beginning, where I did this partial analysis that only looked at half the picture, we were looking at the downside of what someone or people could associate with, the downside of involving coaches or consultants to come in and work with their teams or their organizations. Well, AI would be much faster and less expensive, but that's not the whole picture. It's just half the picture. So I'd like to look at the Gleischer's formula in the context of this tension. I know there are lots of variations of it. I think Steve even has a variation where he has the support in that equation. This approach looks at it strictly from a polarity perspective around change and stability. It can be overlaid with SWOT, immunity to change, appreciative inquiry, future search, shadow work. And I'd just like to run through it with you in the context of this change and stability that we're all dealing with. If we look at the dissatisfaction and the threats, there's a vision and a strength that's associated with continuity. So we don't want to lose something, we want to keep something. And then on the other side, or on the downside of that, that could lead to an unintended consequence if we only focus on the human. If we only focus on the AI, and we could be moving from that dissatisfaction and weakness to vision and opportunities around taking advantage of those tools, we could also get ourselves in trouble, which leads to another level of dissatisfaction and another type of threat. So as you can see, we've got basically two versions of D and two versions of vision. So just looking at the resistance portion, without getting into too much detail here, from a polarity perspective, there's always wisdom in the resistance. So it's not something to be overcome. It's not something to be avoided. It's not something to be crushed. There's wisdom in it. So when we organize the wisdom of this D times V times F and R, what we're doing is we're trying to unpack the fears and the values and the other fears and values that might be associated with the other pole. So change and stability in this case, the change is going to be associated with artificial intelligence, the non-conscious silicon-based stuff. And then the stability is, from our perspective, something we'd probably like to hang on to, and that's the human interaction, the conscious carbon-based focus that we bring that's so valuable. They both have downsides. And if we only focus on one upside to the neglect of the other upside, we can end up in an unintended consequence, which would lead to dissatisfaction and weaknesses. What I like to say is AI is not going to replace us, but humans that use it well will replace other humans that don't use it well. If we're only using AI, and I say this to my clients too, if you're only using AI, you're setting yourself up for a real downside. And so I believe that coaches and consultants who can integrate these tools will be better coaches and consultants. If we flip back and forth, we could end up in a vicious cycle. Maybe we sort of balance it, which is not actually a very aspirational goal. I would set the goal here to how do we figure out as individuals and as a community, how we can maximize the best of the change with artificial intelligence and AI tools, together with the best of what we bring in convening these conversations and providing a safe space for them to happen. One way to get hooked and stuck is to choose a pole. And I think that there's probably a seduction right now to the AI. Everything's AI. It's like, oh, this is like, you know, an AI glass of water, and this is an AI telephone, and this is just put AI, and it's like it's somehow better. And I don't believe that's the case for everything. I think it's an integration of human and AI. But if we completely cut ourselves off from the discussion because of our own fear, then we can end up in our own downside. So that's, let's see, I got a minute and 54 left. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover. There are two things in tension with one another here, two dissatisfactions, two visions, and they're both legitimate and important. We just overlay an adult ego development perspective on all this. We could look at a lot of the AI tools and what they're coming from in terms of their language models are really based in the conventional mindset for the most part. And when you start looking at algorithms, they are actually fomenting group-centric and self-centric impulsive behaviors, which is why the first 10 years of AI haven't gone so well. And we see the results of that actually today. So that's where I'd like to stop and open it up for discussion. It looks like we've got I thought there was some chat questions, but anyway, we're going to have some opportunity for breakouts, I guess. Steve?
Yeah, well, I think what we'll do a little breakout, and then we'll come back and have some deeper discussion, which is we got plenty of time for that. Could you just explain in the last figure you had, could you explain for the audience a little bit about moving from the left side to the right side and over there in the direction of that unitive notion?
Oh, sure.
Could you explain a little bit about the moving and self-questioning, actualizing, construct aware? You know, as a person, could you maybe give an example of a person kind of going from the left side, moving into the right side, and what that would look like for a person that's listening?
Yeah, that's a huge question. And oops, there's my, that's a huge question. I think if I were to net it out, and there's probably more wisdom in the room on this model than I have. I'm familiar with it. I've been, I've done a certification with Suzanne Cook-Reuter and Jennifer Garvey Barger, others. But the net of it is that we go through these stages in the process of our own maturation as into adulthood. And in the beginning, it's very predictable, the stages we go through. And as we learn to hold complexity with more ease, then we're able to actually operate from a place that's more post-conventional, that's going to be on the right side. And leaders today, we need more leaders like that today. People tend to follow the leader. And if the leader is operating out of an impulsive, self-centric or group-centric place, we can see how that can impact an entire nation, for example. And all the decisions that follow are going to be rooted in that mindset. And it's an oversimplification of complexity that can result in some really absolutely horrific consequences for people. And in this case, I would say the one I'm thinking of, racism, sexism, increase in differentiation between the haves and have-nots, and vilification, and just lots of drama and victim mentality.
Yeah, so and we're going to break out to the groups. I just wanted to get people a sense of the self-determining to self-questioning. You know, as you move across, can you give me what is a person saying and thinking as they move from the left to the right side? So self-determining to self-questioning. What does that sound like in a person?
You're asking me, or are you opening it to
Yeah, I'm asking you, and then we're going to go to groups. I just wanted to kind of leave that.
It's recognizing that we are all in it together, that no one person has all the answers, and that we can navigate our problems and solutions better together by listening.
Mm-hmm. And that's going into self-questioning. Would you say it's moving into the questioning side? So I'm trying to get a sense so people can see.
It's who am I in these tensions? That's the self-questioning. Who am I in these tensions?
Gotcha.
So it's an inside-out game. You can't even do the outside game without the inside to be able to say, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? What's my what's the potential that I have to make an impact, not just for myself and my group, but the system, et cetera.
And and bear with me on this. There's a breakthrough piece when you go from one side to the other, as you break through the self-determining. What does that sound like as a person starts switching from self-determining self-talk, if you will, and thinking, to self-questioning? Do you have a sense of that shift? What does that look like? What is a person saying as they begin to I'm saying this, and then I start moving into self? What does that sound like?
I think that you're tapping into a degree of trust in this conversation, in which a person recognizes the creativity, the resourcefulness, the wholeness in the other, and they're able to hold a place for that relationship to grow and blossom, and for the outcomes, not just the process, but the outcomes to be better. Not just for one or the other, but for both.
Gotcha. Okay. So we're going to go to breakouts in groups of 3 or 4. And I'd like for you all to take a few minutes, get to know each other, and then discuss what your reactions and what you're learning and how it's impacting you. And then bring some curiosities back, bring a question back, have someone be prepared to kind of type a question in the chat so we can gather that. So have someone that was willing to represent your group. It can be all of you if you want. And we'll come back and have some really good discussion. So Lisa, if you could open up the rooms and go have a really nice conversation with somebody. Cliff and David, stay here, and we'll have a nice conversation here with us, and then we'll bring everybody back in about 10 to 15 minutes.
Great, thanks.
So people should see, yeah. Okay, there we go. Great. So it's funny, Cliff. And I wanted to keep the conversation going. So if you could bear with me on this, because I'm not sure I'm getting there. I'm trying to get at, because I'm really curious about this. Could you pull that diagram back up real quick, and then I want to finish that, and I'd love to hear you two kind of connecting with what you're thinking. But
This one here.
yeah. And so what does self-determining look like? versus self-questioning? Because that's a breakthrough piece, right? That green line suggests there's a breakthrough happening. And
Yeah,
so what is it?
yeah.
What am I saying? And what does it look like when I'm in self-determining? And then what does it look like when I'm in self-questioning? And I'm just curious about that kind of breakthrough.
Yeah, I think it's rooted in kind of goal orientation at its core, which is not in itself a problem. But it's also it's coming. You're looking at the center of gravity. It's like what's behind the drive towards the goal. And it's I want to get this promotion. I want to be this, or make
So when
this.
I'm in the self-determining place, is that
Yeah,
what you're saying right there?
yeah,
That's I
yeah,
want to get this promotion. I want to get this goal. I want
right,
to achieve this thing. And so there's a
yeah,
self-determination. And so I'm trying to be in control of my world around me. Then
right.
something happens, you're saying. Something happens.
Something happens
And
where,
then there's a
wow, I've gotten all
self-question,
my
like,
needs met. I'm pretty comfortable. I could keep striving and keep going for the next, gold ring. But actually, what's my real purpose in life? Like, what's really behind my motivation? And so it's this place to say, is this really, that 5 or 10 years that I spent, being a great technical leader and getting all this knowledge and skill, what's it really all for? And what's it in service to? And is there more than just my success? And so it's a post-conventional mindset that begins to look at deeper questions that probably tie into some of the things in the higher
right.
elements of the Maslow
Yeah, no,
hierarchy.
I'm
I've
getting that.
got all
Right, right,
these
right.
needs
Yeah,
met.
yeah.
What's the self-actualization stuff look like? You know,
And and so it's
just
kind of yeah.
that question is a good one.
Yeah, yeah. And it seems a little bit like it's like it's a 2 steps forwards, 1 step back. You're accomplishing, you're
It
getting things
can
done,
be.
and all of a sudden you get to a place, oh, I'm just not so, what is all this for? Why? What?
Yeah,
How? And then you begin saying, well, let me translate that into actualizing and something that matters and purpose and
yeah.
then you move into this construct aware, which is
Yeah, that's seeing systems in ways that were just not available to you before. So
right.
by opening up these questions and looking at who am I, and exploring, whatever that crossing that threshold into that new room, or that new, into that new back area with that you hadn't seen before. Like, what is that? What learning did that open you up to, and what other questions does it
Yeah,
begin
right.
to create? And so then you're starting to see more complexity in the context of all the stuff that you carried with you from before, in terms of all the technical skills, and maybe you can apply those skills to really make people's life better at scale. And now you're really looking at how I can impact systems and mentor and coach people to greater levels of individual performance and self-satisfaction. And all of a sudden I'm feeling like I'm making a real difference in the world. And it's not about me. It's about,
Right. Yeah.
it's about the systems.
Yeah, yeah. And so synchronicity and equifinality pops in here on me because I think
Yeah,
as a person begins to question, they become like this, they come apart a little bit, if you will. Things are coming
yeah,
apart and they begin
yeah,
finding, and then they think like, I got purpose, which is kind of a divergence. And then they converge around this self-actualizing purpose.
yeah,
And as they do that, they begin to see patterns. They begin to see
yeah,
the synchronicity and equifinality that's flying around. The world is less complicated in one sense. They see the complexity in a less complicated way, and they
yeah,
begin to make sense of things and make patterns and see it. And then they begin saying, okay, how can
right.
I be that unitive? How can I be a force for bringing more unity in the work? Yeah, so that's really good. I wanted to get a sense of that and how it connects. I was really curious about that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
I
would
want to
love to hear
David,
more about Dave had some really, David, you had some really tangible to me facial reactions there to some of this stuff. Will you share what that was about?
Oh, I was thinking about myself. I was thinking, I mean, as Cliff was talking there, you talk about sort of gaining technical knowledge and what have you sort of over your lifetime. I was thinking, where was the transition for me personally, from being focused on myself, if you like, to being focused on humanity, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think it was always there with me in the background. I was always fascinated by the world and where we come from and where we're heading. My degrees in physics, I always had an intense curiosity about the universe, evolution, all the stuff, where we come from, where we're going. So that was always there. But I suspect it was really only when I could afford, when I effectively retired, in the sense that I no longer needed to earn a living, and my children were grown, and I was divorced, that I could start to think about some bigger things rather than just myself. But it was always there, lurking in the background. So the question in my head is, how does it work for other people? Because it would be good in the world to see more people really doing what you're saying, Cliff, and that's figuring out how they can make a contribution to the world rather than
David,
just surviving, if you like.
David, was there an aha moment for you that promoted your shift, your movement? Was there an event, something that?
Well, that was a question that was going through my head. I thought about it in the past, and I'm thinking about it now. I can't identify a single aha moment. I think it came about slowly.
Gotcha.
I think.
So what did you all think as you listened to each other? How what was happening for you, and what are you curious about with each other's talks?
Well, I think the part that I didn't, I didn't get a chance to, just because of time. I was thinking David's work, or the focus of his stuff, ties into first steps, which is on the polarity map, is going to be all about conversation. And so I had the first steps in the context of some things that actually work for both upsides. So I was trying to think, if I were to net out, like, what are the things that would be most useful that would support both upsides? And it's all around conversations, around how these tools are actually working for us, not just in both the process and the outcome. And that's all human. That's all human.
It's all human. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where the humans retain some degree of control in this process, because these tools are powerful and there's a huge seduction for them. And that's where the early warnings come in, especially on the downside of AI. If we don't have these conversations, it allows bias to happen, and it allows our fears to cause us to act. When we feel like we're in threat, we're going to act badly towards each other. So we have to be clear on what's the source of our fear, what's happening. We have to have those conversations.
Yes, it's those conversations that are, well, again, two things that I said earlier. One, making better sense of the world, but making better sense of ourselves, because we really don't understand ourselves and what drives us and what motivates us. I said earlier, we like to think we're very rational creatures. We're bloody well not.
Right.
Mostly irrational creatures. Everything's driven by emotion. But just touching on the AI piece, I popped a link a little bit earlier into the chat, because I see, like you, that AI is there as a what I call it a thinking partner, it's it's not there to replace it. So
Yeah.
I take a look at how you can use chatbots to aid critical thinking.
Yeah.
So, and again, I do it all the time now. So you either write something and give it to ChatGPT and say, criticize this for me, or you ask ChatGPT to write something for you, and then say, and the next thing, always, every time, say, now criticize this for me. Even though it's just written it will then quite nicely tear it apart for you. And it's not that you're looking at that and saying, oh, this is gospel. This is triggering your thought processes. We still need a being to look at it and say, yeah, that's good. I hadn't thought of that. But hey, it's got that wrong, or I feel it's got that wrong, or that's biased, or what have you. So it's being able to interact with the Gen AI tools in a way where we are, I won't say in control, but it's a partner. It's a thinking partner. We recognize its strengths, and we recognize our strengths, and we.
Well, what I love about that part of it is it takes if there's one thing that's triggered me more than anything in my whole career, it's when people talk about the smartest person in the room, or trying to be the smartest person in the room. Now, the smartest person in the room is anybody who's holding one of these. So that just it's a level.
Is it smart, or is it just providing a wealth of
it's the data
information?
Yeah.
I would hesitate to call it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're parsing words here in terms of what we're talking about smart, but it's just taking all of that and basically saying, okay, we've got that part wrapped up in terms of what are the the sort of base facts, if you will, and then what's the impact?
It's only a matter of time now where one of the panels here in chat on Zoom will be an AI. It would be ChatGPT with an avatar.
Exactly.
Taking part in this conversation, and because we can give restrictions, we can say, just interrupt when we get things wrong. Well, hey, take part in this conversation fully as if you're with us.
What are we not seeing? Kind of thing.
Pause and answer those questions. Again, do the critical thinking. What are we not thinking? What's a different perspective? Play devil's advocate on this.
I wanted to do that. I wanted to bring up
around the corner. That's right around.
Yep. I was thinking of doing like one of our panels be 3 different chatbots, and having them like go at it and talk and then critique each other and do all that. That would be kind of fun to do. You want to do that? Dave, you want to do that one day?
I've figured out like a hack by which you could do it right now. Sort of by connecting your iPhone to another computer and coming
it's agent to agent.
Agent to agent. I mean, it could, and I just haven't had time to get around to testing it out. If I do, I'll share it with everybody but it's only a matter of time before it's going to be an integral part.
One of the ways I red teamed some of the coaching chat box is I had them coach each other. So I took one's answer. One was essentially the client, the other, and I just basically, traded their responses and their questions. I also had one where I acted as Donald Trump, taking actual quotes from ChatGPT on how he might respond to inputs from an online coach, and then just kept the process going. And he eventually fired the AI coach and wanted to fire the chief of staff who recommended that he try it. And the chat box actually took up for the person. Was pretty astounding. It actually told me that these things are really powerful. It basically said, like to invite you to think about that. This person was doing something that they thought might be supportive. There's no reason to fire them for it, kind of thing. It was really quite astounding. If I wouldn't have known better, I would have thought that there was actually a person behind there, probably getting a little bit of that.
I just got you a better idea. Imagine Zoom like this. Imagine a virtual Donald Trump in here, but also imagine a virtual moderator who was listening to both sides of the conversation. Actual stuff.
Then it becomes a simulation, right?
It's a simulation. It's a simulation.
Everyone's an OD person now, and it's or should be. And
I know a friend who was invited to an online debate. And so he was in the debate and he was debating, but he had his phone on his lap and getting ChatGPT to give him advice to help win the debate. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. Containment's the biggest problem, according to everybody. And it's like, how do we contain it? And if we can't, it basically takes over decisions for us. And it's the first tool we've ever invented that could make its own decisions. You know, even like nuclear bombs don't make the decision to explode themselves, but AIs, they're increasing their autonomy, and they all don't talk. They're all very narrow in their focus, but pretty soon they're going to start talking to each other, and one AI is going to get help from another, and they're going to be so powerful that we're just going to put our trust in them if we don't keep our own human agency in the process. And it's going to be really hard because they're going to come up with stuff that we couldn't do on our own, and it's incredibly seductive and tempting to trust them. But we all have to do it. Our teams have to do it. Our organizations have to do it. Our nations have to do it if it's going to work. And that's what's scary, because the last 10 years we're looking at AIs in their amoeba stage, and we haven't done a very good job of that. And if the next 10 years is putting, hyper powerful tools in our hands, with bad actors, it's pretty much over. We're going dictator route.
Yeah.
I hear exactly what you're saying, and I've got the same fears, but there's a little part of me, maybe a big part of me, that says maybe not. But maybe that's just wishful thinking.
It's not self-deterministic, but we got to put our human sort of big person thinking hats on about how we're going to do this.
Yeah, so they'll be coming back in just a minute with some questions and things like that. There was, in your slides, David, there was I don't know if you can bring them up, because there was one question I had for you, and I couldn't remember.
Okay, share. Where have they gone? There. Share.
Yeah, if you can, I can see the go down a little bit. Go down, just scroll down a little bit. There's one question. Let me see down here. It was go down a little bit more. And let's see here. I think, I'm trying to remember. There was something that you had made. There was a point you had made in here, an assertion, and maybe it's under the why slide, which is like the why conversation. And then and it was about this notion of leadership you were talking about. But there was something that you were asserting in that was really important. There are 2 points that you made. The one was the last point, which is convening a conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that's really profound. What conversation can you convene that hasn't been convened?
Yeah, I still love it. I still love that idea.
It's a brilliant one. There was one other point that you made before that around leadership, about something about, and it was about authority. And I think somebody had asked that.
Seeing leadership as a practice, not as a position of authority.
Right.
Is the fundamental piece. Who was it? Somebody in the chat.
Yeah, asked about that. Ryan had asked about that. So
Ryan had asked, under whose authority do you convene a conversation? Well, hey,
right.
You don't need any authority, or my authority.
Yeah. But I have to respect your authority, don't I?
Yes. Oh, you're there, Ryan. Yes. So yes, you do. Otherwise, there's not going to be a conversation, is there?
Yeah. Lisa, you can bring everybody back in. Let's see everybody. And David, you can stop sharing your slides.
Yeah. Sure.
And Lisa, bring everybody back, and let's all come
Yeah,
back.
I think a few of us are back already, just so you know.
Yeah. Just bring everybody back into a big panel here, big screen with everybody. Yeah, good. We're all here.
24 of us.
So yeah, let's just open it up. What if anybody wants to raise their hand, we can make sure if you have something you really want to. Dave wants to come in, so Dave, come on in, and if you have something, raise your hand or make a point. We'll just bring you in and tell us a little bit about your conversation. Yeah, any
There's a little yellow hand too, but I'm old fashioned. One word that emerged in a conversation with three of us: human energy. Energy. And the AR polarities, they draw electrical energy from a vast source of needed source. But we have to have human energy. And I think a lot of it comes, like we manifested, in those 15 minutes. It's conversation, wanting to get to know each other more, and at the same time trying to address a question or a problem. Let me ask David, what do you think about, is that too vague, this question of human energy?
It's not too vague. What drives us to have conversations? One of the things I've tried to look at in the past is the evolution of conversation. It seems that if you go back to the days of the Greeks and the Romans, conversation wasn't quite what it is today. It was much more rhetoric. People were much more formal in the way that they interacted with each other, and conversation kind of really started to blossom about the time of the Enlightenment, where we were driven a lot more by curiosity. And I often wonder what drives me personally, and I always come back to curiosity. So it's curiosity, I think, that's the energy, if you like, behind having conversations. I want to know about other people. I want other people to tell me when I'm wrong. I want other people to give me other ideas. I again, like a lot of people, I'm a truth seeker rather than a truth imposer. Yeah, I think that's where the energy comes from. It's from innate human curiosity. I've got a 7-month-old granddaughter. I mean, she's 7 months old, and she's just started to crawl. And she's immensely curious. She's crawling all over the floor, looking for things to investigate. I mean, it's there.
That's energy.
Embedded in our DNA.
Yeah.
That's
What's interesting, David, and if anybody wants to talk, raise your hand, we'll grab you. I'll just show you one interesting fact, David. I don't know if you know that, you probably do. Around the time of Enlightenment, that time where all this innovation and all kinds of things were coming up, it was right at a change in society where they were moving from drinking beer and drinking beer and so forth, because that was the only thing that was safe to drink, because water wasn't safe. And so what they started to do is they shifted from drinking beer to coffee, and they started creating cafes. They started having conversation cafes back then. And that's where they talked about these as being the place where conversations started happening and ideas started shifting and impacting it. So it's like going from beer to coffee to cafes.
I think 1654, the first coffee house in London, in the city of London. I visited it. Well, it's not there anymore. It wasn't a coffee house. It was a coffee stall in a courtyard behind a church called St. Michael's Church in Cornhill, just a few hundred yards from the current day Bank of England. Now, London is one of the premier financial institutions in the world. It started in a coffee house, and those coffee houses grew very rapidly over the next 100 years before they faded out for various reasons. But you're absolutely right, Steve. Before then, you drank weak beer, because it didn't kill you, but it wasn't too good for your thinking process. But then when coffee came along, it totally transformed everything, and part of the reason that I run knowledge cafes rather than knowledge forums or what have you. It's that association connection with the history of coffee.
Yeah. Hey, Ted has a thought. It's really good to see you, Ted. It's good to see everybody
Yes,
here.
Steve,
So,
thanks
yeah.
for the invitation. Good to see
Yeah.
people I know. I'm going to put this in because I was excited by it, and I think maybe others. You asked about a question, and I think the one that we kind of centered on was, who am I? Who am I in all of this? And that led us to, this is where I'm not going to remember because I get, as a typical introvert, I get centered in my own stuff. The David, the notion that you're speaking from a dialogic perspective, I think, and that seems to be, that's how I have it. And well, let me back up a minute. Our David in our groups spoke of the AI as a goes out and researches and finds the themes that are out there. And that is the basis of the intelligence that it brings. Some of you have been calling it, I guess, digital intelligence or that kind of thing. However, it doesn't discern whether it's, otherwise it may be finding a lot of themes that are ignorance themes, because people are contributing to that. So it becomes and it's such a part of our life in social media now that, and people manipulate it with misinformation, purposely putting in misinformation, even in a global scale. So again, the question, who am I, and how, where in the past we might have had research, positive research on human behavior that we trusted as a protocol for determining what was the static and what was something to rely on. We don't have that as much if we don't give it up. Otherwise, I termed it, I think we've devalued rationality too much in all of this. So what is it that we trust? How is it that we get grounded in who we are and want to become and be meaningfully reflected on that? So one of the things would be, in all of this, we need, in the uncertainty and the complexity of the ways that we receive information and we share it, how do we, what is our discernment protocol? What are they? Are there discernment protocols that help us to maintain a sense of who we are, not lose our sense of self, lose ourself? Because God knows we had a lot of ways to lose ourselves before we had all the AI. And so that's kind of the gist of piece of what we were talking about. I invite anybody who is in on our conversation to join. To keep from being, I had a term, is it to keep from becoming a transactional consciousness, since that is the way that we live a lot of our life, transactional with each other, transactional with the AI, with the internet, with our phones, with YouTube, all of that. So that was a question, and it's really a basic one. Who am I? The old, many of you are probably familiar with the old Gestalt experiment. Who am I? Who are you? You keep asking the question. But how do we know? How do we? And part of it, I'll say personally, I'm just coming off of an election in the U.S. which went a completely awry of what my intuition thought it would go, and I have it being a study in how information is shared, treated, taken in, swallowed whole or not.
let me just pick up on one little issue there, Ted, that intrigues me, and that's the issue of who we trust when it comes to picking up information. I often say that when it comes to, say, climate change, what does Greta Thunberg know about climate change? She's not a scientist. She's probably never ever read any of the scientific papers, but she believes in it, and many people believe in it, and many people trust her and believe in her. But there's nothing rational about it. If you think about the vast majority of our so-called knowledge, it's not based on any rationality. It's based on who we trust. A teacher, I believe that the earth circles the sun. I would have difficulty proving that to you. I mean, I was taught it at school. I've read books and what have you, but I've got no direct experience of it. And I think that probably the vast majority of our knowledge is like that. It's based on who we trust. And so when it comes to politics, it's based on our tribe. We tend to trust the leaders of our tribe, and we don't tend to question that. We just accept it.
So as
critically,
the collective, you call for a collective consciousness and a responsibility for the collective. How do we achieve that if there is no truth but who you trust? If it's a very clever, I'm sorry, I'm going to be political here, very clever sociopath, how do we know who to trust?
Yeah.
And how do we rein in the collective dynamic?
I don't have an answer. It's one of the biggest challenges I think that we face in the world today.
Yeah, we got some, and
can I offer a perspective?
Yeah, and then we'll go to Patricia. Patricia's been waiting. Yeah, go ahead. Andrew.
Okay, so very, very simply, in the political sense, and this is from American, let's say, intelligence side, they use the word trust but verify. In other words, you trust it, but you have the responsibility to go and check whether it's true or not. You don't just assume that. That's what I'd offer anyway.
Yeah. It's a great polarity for the age of AI.
Yeah.
Patricia, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I want to do a shout out for the webinar you did back in October. I just put it in the chat. It was UC. It was so good. Just one of the best I've ever attended. So thank you for that. We talked about, I posed, or I considered women are in leadership. One of the big topics that we've been looking at this past year is neurodivergent leadership. And by definition, in a way, most women are neurodivergent leaders because we don't think and posit the way the standard leadership models have been built. So then, Kim, I'm going to call on you to speak to, and Jim too, in our triad. We had a great conversation about how these processes are inherently built for inclusion, built to include all the voices, which would be inclusive of all the different intelligences. But Kim, what was the question we came up with?
So we decided on how do these two leadership models that you have been presented today enable us to design for collective diversity?
It's a cool term.
Jim, you got anything to add?
No, I think that, I mean, that was one of our two questions. We're just, discussing the challenge or the opportunity in that space. Any thoughts?
Just pose the question again. I just didn't quite keep it in my head.
How do these two leadership models, the two that have been presented today, enable us to design for collective diversity? We also talked about how to build processes and design for inclusion.
Yeah.
If that helps.
Well, the one I shared basically is focusing on one thin slice and one topic area. But if I were to answer your question, I would say you're looking at the part and whole tension. And the benefit of focusing on any part is freedom, uniqueness, and initiative. We all want that. And the benefit of focusing on the whole is equity or equality and connectedness and synergy. It's the only place we can get those things is when we focus on the whole. And there's always going to be tension between the parts and the wholes. But the degree to which we can all support a both and mindset in that context, the less we will end up in trouble. It's a big ask, but it's necessary. I mean, and is not a solution, but it's a process requirement and the tension between parts and wholes. And so that would be my quick and dirty answer for that question.
You know, as I was listening, I think that the way I think of it is part and whole is really looking at this notion that you are you as and in a way, you're on the left side of that scale that I was talking to you about. And you have an opportunity to convene a conversation that brings more unity on the other side of that, right? So so it's about, I think what connects the two is that it shines a light on that I have a personal responsibility to create more wholeness. And so if I have a personal responsibility, I got to understand self-determinate myself. I got to understand myself, the left side. I don't have to let that go. Or my part, I'm a part. And then on the other side is where can I convene conversations that would not otherwise have happened? Where can I do that?
Yeah.
And that's about the whole.
I think Rihanna's had her hand up for a while too.
Yeah, Rihanna. Thanks for being patient, Rihanna. You won the award today for patience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually one of my superpowers.
Honed through years of
Yeah,
experience.
I don't feel like I can report for the group. I really don't. And there's one thing that came up, a comment in our group that I've been a little stuck on. I think it's relevant to this conversation, and that's the notion of leaders and non-leaders. Now, my question is, who are the non-leaders? You know, in David's framework, everyone is a leader or potentially a leader, just to convene a conversation.
Yeah.
And when we say leader, what's our stereotypic notion of what a leader looks like? How much of it is tied to initiating and taking up airtime and taking up social space, being at the center of social space and so forth? Someone who I or you might see as a non-leader could really be the person who convened the conversation that's meaningful for everyone.
Yes. Yeah.
So you know, to me, leader and non-leader sounds like I'm going to say like a false duality. Whether it's a polarity or not, I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I think it'd be
just
helpful
feel
to
like
answer the
I
question about what it is and what it's not. And so if it's, for example, a follower, we all have to be followers from time to time to be good leaders. And so I actually do think everyone's a leader because they're leading themselves, you know, every day in some form or fashion, whether they're responsible for others formally in an organization, that's a different question, but
well, that's a
everyone has an
manager or a
impact.
supervisor in my paradigm.
Yeah.
I think we're all, you know, I think you and David both spoke to the notion of collective responsibility.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder where that shows up on that developmental change model is where is the point at which in my own development, and by the way, I'm 78. Where is the point in my own chronological development where I begin to take responsibility for others and their welfare? And not just be thinking about myself, my own development, my own success, my own achievement, whatever that might be, And is that something that as a society, we should, this is a question that we should have a sense of as responsibility for the collective in some way, at least in our own spheres of influence.
Yes. Yeah, totally with you there, Diana.
Yeah, I think I'm done. A little bit of a rant. I'm okay with it. It's another one of my superpowers.
Great rant. Thank you.
That was a great.
I want to channel Robert Reynolds right now. Robert, I want to go on a retreat and take some, was it cyclosaban? What is it? What's that stuff called? And look at your wall behind you. And I want to see what happens to me. I just have this sense you have this this adorable smile that you have, or this smirk that as you were listening. What could you? I don't. Is there something there that you could share that was as you were reflecting? Let me hit the unmute button.
Well, let me first say that when I first arrived, I was a little embarrassed and thought I showed up in the wrong room. But after I, hung around to listen to what was happening, I was really glad that I did. I have a little disc problem, and so this wall is my headboard on my bed. So I'm just I'm taking the call from bed. I'll try to summarize. The last comment was on point. As I say, is at some point in life you reach a point where you have something to say, and I refer to it as dialogue, and that means I can put aside all of my assumptions and I can listen forever to anyone from whatever their point of view is. And so I think that conversation, there's an art and skill to that, and whether we call it leadership or not is not really it's not part of my lexicon. That's maybe it's just like when you get older you have your point of view and you feel entitled to share it. But I think that we don't necessarily just graduate from conversation to leadership, that we have to learn a certain art and skill of dialogue. And I think that would be my summary on the first speaker. On the second speaker, it gets to this point of, he referred to the word tension. And in my research, I use that word, and I understand that, it's a misunderstood word, and that I just wonder if he struggled with that word, or because we noted that nexus that he speaks of, it could be a point of joy as easily as it could be a point of tension. And I just would really like to understand, his choice of words on that, and how he came to that. But thanks for giving me the opportunity to say something.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. And we are getting to where we have to wrap up. So I'll give our speakers a last word. Andrew, you want to put your voice in? You raised your hand briefly, and then I'll ask David and Cliff to say goodbye with some final thoughts.
Yeah, just a quick a quick sort of interpretation of what was asked about. We were asked in our organization, how we define an expert, and the bottom line is, it's someone who's authorized to talk on a topic. If you're authorized to talk on it, you can talk on it. But we decided to think a bit more, and we came up with the idea that an expert is actually someone who will ask questions about the question they're asked. So if someone says, how much do I need to fill this hole? They will start asking questions about, okay, what hole and where is it, and how much time you got, and so it's that's I think what I maybe think that adds to the conversation that or the debate that we're having now. That leadership should look to that. They should look to, if they're going to lead in a direction, that they understand the direction they're going in. If they're going to make a decision, that they are informed in that decision, and that they won't necessarily have all of the tools or the knowledge at their fingertips. And that's why the dialogue needs to happen, so that you have informed leadership and informed answers. Yeah, that's basically the point I wanted to make.
I like the idea that questions are more important than answers, especially questions that cannot be answered.
Yeah. So let's say goodbye, and thank you all for being here. Thank you, David. Thank you, Cliff. So David, what's do you want to add a final thought, a final thing you'd like for us to?
I would just like to leave you all with that question that I posted at the end of my slides. And you know, what's the one conversation that maybe you're avoiding right now that you should be having, or should be convening? And I didn't get a chance to answer that question about how do we convene conversations for diversity. Well, I think we've all got, if we see ourselves as conveners of conversations, then we've all got responsibility to have conversations not with just people who are like-minded, but to have conversations, you know, often across some political divides, religious divides, you know, to break down some of those barriers.
Thanks. And Cliff, thank you for being here. What are your thoughts? What final thought you'd like to leave us with?
I'll just respond to the tension question by saying, if we care enough to be curious about what someone's experience is, we're learning about their values and maybe their fears, which could lead to all kinds of things that you could call different things: tensions, excitement, joy. So it's a values and language clarification process at its heart that's based in energy. So back to that energy term. So yeah, that's probably what I can say about that.
Well, thank you. And thanks, everybody. If you could put in the chat maybe a takeaway, a nugget, a comment, so that I can kind of see what you're taking away. That'll be helpful to our speakers to know kind of what your takeaway is and how you're leaving today. So maybe in the chat before you go, just a little bit about how you're leaving and so forth. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lisa, for your good work and supporting the process. I see David Bright still here. Thank you, David, for AOM, the od&c division support of this. I appreciate that. And to all of you for being here, just really blessed that we can all be together and be in this conversation. So have a great day, and see you all very soon. We'll have a great another panel next week, Thursday. We have them all the way through February. So to keep on the lookout for that. See you all soon, and bye for now.
Take care.